Brothers and sisters in Islam, peace be upon you, this is Salim bin Mohammed Rafi. I am bringing to you the highlights of the Holy Quran along with historic background under which various ayats were revealed and added in different surahs by our Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. The reason this is given separately is to make this information available to the serious student who wishes to understand depth of the words of Allah Subhanahu revealed for the benefit of whole mankind through our Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa, peace be upon him. Sit back, relax and listen now. 7th Para. The 7th Para or Juz of the Quran is Waiza Sami'u, which has two surahs. The first one is Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, Ayat 83 to 120, and second is Surah Al-An'am 6, Ayat 1 to 110, total no of ayat in this para, 148. Highlights of Para 7, Part 7 of Holy Quran. There are two surah mentioned in this para. The remaining part of Surah Ma'idah and the starting part of Surah Inam. In Surah Al-An'am, the message of Tawhid is highly emphasized and it contains its basic principles. It gives beautiful description of Allah's creative power. It criticizes shirk and its manifestations. Basic topics discussed here are, oneness of Allah is the reality in this universe, polytheism has no foundation and Allah's judgment will come and the truth will prevail. Some Christians came closer to Islam and recognized the truth, prohibition against intoxicants, gambling, and shirk, respect of the Kaaba, rules against idolatry and about testimony, some miracles of Jesus, how the teachings of Jesus were corrupted after his departure. Allah created the heaven and earth but the non-believers call others equal to Allah. Allah's punishment came upon those who denied the truth. On the day of judgment, the mushrikeen, polytheists, will admit their guilt. Those who deny the hereafter, they are the real losers. Non-believers ridiculed Allah's prophets, but in the end the truth prevailed. Nations were warned before. Allah did try them in various ways. Believers should be respected. Allah is the final judge and he will decide the destiny of the individuals or nations. Allah's majesty, power, and might. Prophet Ibrahim's arguments against shirk. Other prophets also gave the message of Tawhid. Allah's revelation to his prophets and Allah's signs in the creation. There are three things mentioned in the remaining part of Surah Ma'idah. Compliments for people of Habsha, the problems of halal and haram and the resurrection and mentioning of Hazrat Isa, peace be upon him. Compliments for people of Habsha. When Quran is recited in front of them, they get all teary by listening to Quran. Few problems of halal and haram. Do not earn haram from everything. There is no blame on vanity but you have to pay kafara over infidelity. You either have to feed 10 needy people or give them clothes to wear, free one slave, or if any of these deeds are not possible then fast for 3 days as kafara. Drinking wine, gambling, and worshipping idols is haram in Islam. Peace is for those who enter the house. 4 kinds of animals were considered forbidden by non-Muslims. Sea animals, Siba, Wasila and Ham. The resurrection and mentioning of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. On the day of judgment when Allah will ask all the prophets that what response did you get when you spread my message? In the context of same question Allah will remind Jesus, peace be upon him, of all the blessings he showered on him and his followers described in Surah Ma'idah. Pilgrims said to Jesus, peace be upon him, to ask Allah for a feast which has heavenly delight of eating and drinking, so they were given heavenly feast. Allah will ask Jesus, peace be upon him, by counting his blessings, What did you say to the people that they started worshipping you and your mother? Upon that Jesus, peace be upon him, will reply, O my Lord, glory be to you. You are the purest of all. I only told them to obey your orders and pray to you. 3 things are mentioned in the beginning of Surah Inam: oneness, prophecy, and resurrection. Oneness. In this surah, Allah's glory and greatness is described. Prophecy. For the sake of Hazrat Muhammad, blessing of Allah and peace be upon him, Allah mentioned various prophets in this surah. Hazrat Ibrahim, peace be upon him; Hazrat Ishaq, peace be upon him; Hazrat Sulaiman, peace be upon him; Hazrat Ayub, peace be upon him; Hazrat Yusuf, peace be upon him; Hazrat Musa, peace be upon him; Hazrat Harun, peace be upon him; Hazrat Zakaria, peace be upon him; Hazrat Yahya, peace be upon him; Hazrat Isa, peace be upon him; Hazrat Ismail, peace be upon him; Hazrat Yunus, peace be upon him; and Hazrat Lut, peace be upon him. Resurrection. Allah will gather all mankind on the day of judgment, and if any human doesn't get punished on that day, it will be Allah's greatest blessings on him. On the day of judgment, Allah will ask non-Muslims, where are your preachers whom you used to worship on earth? On that day, hypocrites will wish to be brought back into the world so that they would not deny the revelations of God and that they might be believers. The life of the world is a short and temporary, and the life of the hereafter is better and permanent. Historic background. Surah Al-An'am. Ayah's revelation place. 165 Makkah. Name. This surah takes its name from verses 136, 138 and 139, in which some superstitious beliefs of the idolatrous Arabs concerning the lawfulness of some cattle, and /m, and the unlawfulness of some others have been refuted. Period of revelation. According to a tradition of Ibn Abbas, the whole of the surah was revealed at one sitting at Makkah. Asma, a daughter of Yazid and a first cousin of Hadrat Mu'az bin Jabal, says, during the revelation of the surah was riding on a she-camel and I was holding her nose string. The she-camel began to feel the weight so heavily that it seemed as if her bones would break under it. We also learn from other traditions that dictated the whole of the surah the same night that it was revealed. Its subject matter clearly shows that it must have been revealed during the last year of the Holy Prophet's life at Makkah. The tradition of Asma, daughter of Yazid, also confirms this. As she belonged to the Ansar and embraced Islam after the migration to Yathrib, her visit to at Makkah must have taken place during the last year of his life there. For before this, his relations with those people were not so intimate that a woman from there might have come to visit him at Makkah. Occasion of revelation. After determining the period of its revelation, it is easier to visualize the background of the surah. 12 years had passed since had been inviting the people to Islam. The antagonism and persecution by the Quraysh had become most savage and brutal, and the majority of the Muslims had to leave their homes and migrate to Habash, Abyssinia. Above all, the two great supporters of Abu Talib and Hadrat Khadija were no more to help and give strength to him. Thus he was deprived of all the worldly support. But in spite of this, he carried on his mission in the teeth of opposition. As a result of this, on the one hand, all the good people of Makkah and the surrounding clans gradually began to accept Islam; on the other hand, the community as a whole was bent upon obduracy and rejection. Therefore, if anyone showed any inclination towards Islam, he was subjected to taunts and derision, physical violence, and social boycott. It was in these dark circumstances that a ray of hope gleamed from Yathrib, where Islam began to spread freely by the efforts of some influential people of Aus and Hazraj, who had embraced Islam at Makkah. This was a humble beginning in the march of Islam towards success, and none could foresee at that time the great potentialities that lay hidden in it. For, to a casual observer, it appeared at that time as if Islam was merely a weak movement. It had no material backing except the meager support of the Prophet's own family and of the few poor adherents of the movement. Obviously the latter could not give much help because they themselves had been cast out by their own people who had become their enemies and were persecuting them. Topics. These were the conditions, when this discourse was revealed. The main topics dealt with in this discourse may be divided under 7 headings: refutation of shirk and invitation to the creed of Tawhid. Enunciation of the doctrine of the life after death, and refutation of the wrong notion that there was nothing beyond this worldly life. Refutation of the prevalent superstitions. Enunciation of the fundamental moral principles for the building up of the Islamic society. Answers to the objections raised against the person of and his mission. Comfort and encouragement to and his followers who were at that time in a state of anxiety and despondency because of the apparent failure of the mission. Admonition, warning, and threats to the disbelievers and opponents to give up their apathy and haughtiness. It must, however, be noted that the above topics have not been dealt with one by one under separate headings, but the discourse goes on as a continuous whole, and these topics come under discussion over and over again in new and different ways. The background of Makki Surahs. As this is the first long Makki Surah in the order of the compilation of the Quran, it will be useful to explain the historical background of Makki Surahs in general, so that the reader may easily understand the Makki Surahs and our references to its different stages in connection with our commentary on them. First of all, it should be noted that comparatively very little material is available in regard to the background of the revelation of Makki Surahs, whereas the period of the revelation of all the Madani Surahs is known or can be determined with a little effort. There are authentic traditions even in regard to the occasions of the revelation of the majority of the verses. On the other hand, we do not have such detailed information regarding the Makki Surahs. There are only a few surahs and verses which have authentic traditions concerning the time and occasion of their revelation. This is because the history of the Makki period had not been compiled in such detail as that of the Madani period. Therefore we have to depend on the internal evidence of these surahs for determining the period of their revelation, for example, the topics they discuss, their subject matter, their style, and the direct or indirect references to the events and the occasions of their revelation. Thus it is obvious that with the help of such evidence as this, we cannot say with precision that such and such surah or verse was revealed on such and such an occasion. The most we can do is to compare the internal evidence of a surah with the events of the life of at Makkah, and then come to a more or less correct conclusion as to what particular stage a certain surah belongs. If we keep the above things in view, the history of the mission of at Makkah can be divided into 4 stages. The first stage began with his appointment as a messenger and ended with the proclamation of prophethood 3 years later. During this period the message was given secretly to some selected persons only, but the common people of Makkah were not aware of it. The second stage lasted for 2 years after the proclamation of his prophethood. It began with opposition by individuals, then by and by, it took the shape of antagonism, ridicule, derision, accusation, abuse, and false propaganda. Then gangs were formed to persecute those Muslims who were comparatively poor, weak and helpless. The third stage lasted for about 6 years from the beginning of the persecution to the death of Abu Talib and Hadrat Khadija in the 10th year of prophethood. During this period, the persecution of the Muslims became so savage and brutal that many of them were forced to migrate to Habash. Social and economic boycott was applied against and the members of his family, and those Muslims who continued to stay in Makkah were forced to take refuge in Shibi Abi Talib, which was besieged. The fourth stage lasted for about 3 years from the 10th to the 13th year of prophethood. This was a period of hard trials and grievous sufferings for and his followers. Life had become unendurable at Makkah and there appeared to be no place of refuge even outside it. So much so that when went to Taif, it offered no shelter or protection. Besides this, on the occasion of Hajj, he would appeal to each and every Arab clan to accept his invitation to Islam but met with blank refusal from every quarter. At the same time, the people of Makkah were holding councils to get rid of him by killing or imprisoning or banishing him from their city. It was at that most critical time that Allah opened for Islam the hearts of the Ansar of Yathrib, where he migrated at their invitation. Now that we have divided the life of at Makkah into 4 stages, it has become easier for us to tell, as far as possible, the particular stage in which a certain Makki surah was revealed. This is because the surahs belonging to a particular stage can be distinguished from those of the other stages with the help of their subject matter and style. Besides this, they also contain such references as throw light on the circumstances and events that form the background of their revelation. In the succeeding Makki surahs, we will determine on the basis of the distinctive features of each stage, and point out in the preface, the particular stage in which a certain Makki surah was revealed. Subject: Islamic Creed. This surah mainly discusses the different aspects of the major articles of the Islamic Creed, Tawhid, life after death, prophethood, and their practical application to human life. Side by side with this, it refutes the erroneous beliefs of the opponents and answers their objections, warns and admonishes them and comforts and his followers, who were then suffering from persecution. Of course, these themes have not been dealt with under separate heads but have been blended in an excellent manner. Topics and their interconnection. These verses are of introductory and admonitory nature. The disbelievers have been warned that if they do not accept the Islamic creed and follow the light shown by the revelation from the all-knowing and all-powerful Allah, they would go to the same doom as the former disbelievers did. Their arguments for rejecting the Prophet and the revelation sent down to him have been refuted, and a warning has been given to them that they should not be deluded by the respite that is being granted to them. 1-12 These verses inculcate Tawhid, and refute shirk, which is the greatest obstacle in the way of its acceptance. 13-24 In these verses, a graphic scene of the life in the hereafter has been depicted in order to warn the disbelievers of the consequences of the rejection of the articles of faith. 25-32 Prophethood is the main theme, which has been discussed from the point of view of his mission, the limitations of his powers, the attitude towards his followers, and also from the point of view of the disbelievers. 33-73 In continuation of the same theme, the story of Prophet Abraham has been related to bring home to the pagan Arabs that the mission of Prophet Muhammad, which they were opposing, was the same as that of Prophet Abraham, Allah's peace be upon them. This line of argument was adopted because they considered themselves to be his followers, especially the Quraysh, who were proud of being his descendants as well. 74-90 Another proof of his prophethood is the book, which has been sent down to him by Allah, for its teachings show the right guidance in regard to creed and practice. 91-108 Divine restrictions have been contrasted with the superstitious restrictions of the pagan Arabs in order to show the striking differences between the two and thus prove the Quran to be a revealed book. 109-154 The Jews, who were criticized in verses 144-147 along with the pagan Arabs, have been urged to compare the teachings of the Quran with those of the Torah so that they might recognize their similarity and give up their lame excuses against it, and adopt its guidance to escape the retribution on the day of resurrection. 155-160 This is the conclusion of the discourse has been instructed in a beautiful and forceful manner to proclaim fearlessly the articles of the Islamic creed and their implications. 161-165